The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the quiet neighborhood. Birds chirped softly, and the wind rustled through the trees. Everything looked peaceful. From the outside, it seemed like any ordinary evening. But inside the little house at the end of the street, something dark was about to unfold. John stood by the window, staring at the empty street. He held a cup of coffee in his hand, but he did not drink. His mind was heavy with worry, though he could not explain why. He glanced at his wife, Emma, sitting in her wheelchair near the kitchen. Her smile was gentle, as always, and she looked at him with love that could melt any fear. Emma had been disabled for years after an accident, but she never let it stop her. She had a bright soul, full of laughter, courage, and kindness. John had always admired her strength, and he loved her more than anything in the world. For a few moments, everything felt perfect. Their little house was quiet, safe, and filled with warmth. But the peace was fragile, and John could feel it slipping through his fingers. Across the street, a shadow moved near the neighbor's yard. It was someone he knew too well, the HOA Karen. She was infamous in the neighborhood. Always loud, always controlling, always making problems where there were none. People whispered about her, but no one dared to confront her. John had tried to avoid her as much as possible, but lately, her actions had grown more aggressive. She had started picking fights over small things, flowers in the yard, trash cans left out, even minor noise. And today, he feared, she had come for more than just complaints. Emma noticed the tension in John's face. "What is it?" she asked softly. Her voice was calm, but John could see the worry in her eyes. "I don't know. I just feel something bad is coming," he replied, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. He hated that Emma could sense his fear, but he could not hide it from her. Her intuition was sharp, sharper than anyone else he had ever met. Minutes passed, each one feeling heavier than the last. Then, he saw her HOA Karen walking down the street with a determined look. Her eyes were fixed on their house, and John's heart sank. He could feel the tension building in his chest. Something inside him screamed that this was not just another minor argument. Emma noticed the change in his expression. "Who is that?" she asked, following his gaze. That's Karen," John said, his voice tight. She's coming here." Emma frowned. "Karen? The HOA woman?" "Yes," John said, swallowing hard. She's not happy with us. And I think she's serious this time." Emma tried to reassure him, her hands reaching out to hold his. "John, we've handled her before. We can handle her now." But John was not so sure. Something about the way she walked, the way her eyes burned with anger, made him feel a chill run down his spine. It was as if she had a storm inside her, and he and Emma were standing in the middle of it. The doorbell rang. John froze. He had a bad feeling, a feeling that told him life was about to change forever. He walked slowly to the door, each step heavy, each breath tight in his chest. He opened the door, and there she was, Karen, standing tall, her face twisted with anger. Her voice was sharp and cutting, like ice on fire. "John! Emma," she yelled. "We need to talk. Now." John tried to remain calm, but his hands shook. "Karen, what is it this time?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Karen pushed past him, stepping inside the house without waiting for permission. John's heart raced. Something was wrong. He could feel it in every bone, every heartbeat. This was not about flowers or trash cans. This was bigger. Darker. Dangerous. Emma watched silently, fear flickering across her face. She had learned long ago that when Karen was angry, nothing could stop her. John knew that if things got out of hand, there would be no one to help them. Karen looked around the living room with disdain, her eyes narrowing as she scanned every corner. "You think you can ignore the rules, John? You think you can do whatever you want?" she shouted. John stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "Karen, please, let's just talk. We can fix this." But Karen was not listening. Her anger had taken over. It was as if reason had left her body, replaced by pure rage. John took a deep breath, preparing himself for the confrontation he had hoped would never come. Emma stayed close to him, her hands gripping his arm. He could feel her trembling, and it made his heart ache. He wanted to protect her. He wanted to keep her safe. But deep down, he knew that tonight, nothing would be the same. Karen's voice grew louder, more threatening. You think I will let you break the rules? I will not stop, John. I will make sure you pay. John's mind raced. What could he do? How could he stop her? He looked at Emma, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. He could see her fear, her trust in him, her love for him. And he knew he could not fail her. At that moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. The quiet neighborhood, the birds, the setting sun, all of it faded. There was only Karen, and the storm she had brought with her, and the danger that now filled their home. John swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment crushing him. He had no idea what would happen in the next few minutes, but he knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As Karen stepped closer, John felt a shiver run through his body. He held Emma's hand tightly. His heart pounded. He tried to find a way to stop her, to calm the situation, but deep down, he knew it was too late. And then, everything changed. The air inside the house was thick with unease. John's hands still trembled from the encounter at the door, and Emma's eyes darted nervously toward every shadow. Even the walls seemed to lean closer, listening to Karen's angry words echoing through the rooms. John looked at his wife, the love of his life. Emma had always been strong, but her disability had made her cautious in ways others could never understand. She moved with deliberate care, never rushing, always measuring each step. Yet, despite her physical limits, her spirit was unbreakable. John thought about how she had faced life with courage and grace, even when fate had dealt her a cruel hand. Her smile could light up the darkest room, and her laugh could calm even John's worst fears. But today, her smile faltered. Her laughter was gone. She could feel the storm that had entered their home, and it chilled her to the bone. She had seen Karen before, of course, but never like this. Something had changed. That cold, controlling demeanor she'd always known in Karen had shifted into something darker, more dangerous. Karen paced across the living room like a predator circling its prey. Her eyes scanned every corner, looking for anything she could use against them. Every move she made seemed calculated, deliberate, designed to unsettle them. John swallowed hard. He could feel anger rising in him, but fear kept his voice steady. Karen, he started, please, you don't have to do this. We can talk, we can fix anything. But Karen didn't answer. Instead, she stopped suddenly, her gaze locking onto Emma. For a moment, the room went silent. Emma could feel the intensity of that stare as if it were a physical force pressing against her chest. It made her stomach twist. She wanted to speak, to tell Karen that they had done nothing wrong, but the words wouldn't come. John stepped in front of Emma, trying to shield her, though he knew that words would not stop Karen's wrath. Emma, stay behind me, he said softly, though his own voice trembled. Karen's lips curled into a cruel smile. You think hiding behind him will save you, she sneered. Her voice was low now, dangerous. Rules are rules. And when you break them, you pay the price. John's mind raced. What did she mean by that? What price? He could feel a cold sweat forming on his forehead. The fear that had been gnawing at him since he first saw Karen's shadow on the street now tightened its grip on his chest. Emma, sensing John's rising panic, reached out and held his hand. John, we've faced tough things before. We can face this too. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but there was a strength behind it. A strength John needed more than ever. Karen suddenly stopped pacing. Her attention shifted back to John. You always think you can do whatever you want, she spat. You think rules are for others, not for you. But I won't let that happen. Not here. Not now. John clenched his fists. He wanted to argue, to reason, to remind her that this was only a neighborhood dispute, not a war. But something in Karen's eyes froze him. There was no reasoning with her today. No compromise. Only confrontation. The tension in the room grew heavier. Even the sunlight slipping through the windows seemed weaker, as if the world outside was dimming in response to the storm inside. John could feel his heartbeat pounding in his ears, each thump echoing like a warning. Emma's grip tightened around his hand, silently telling him that together, they could face whatever came next, but what could they really do against such relentless anger? Then, as if sensing the silent question, Karen stepped closer. Her shadow stretched across the floor like a dark tide, and her words cut through the room like knives. "You will learn," she hissed. "You will learn that no one breaks the rules here without consequences." John tried to keep calm. He knew that panic would only make things worse. But deep inside, a terrible feeling settled in his chest, the kind of feeling that told him everything was about to change, and that nothing would ever be the same again. Emma's eyes filled with quiet fear, yet she never let go of his hand. She looked at him with trust, with hope. And for the briefest moment, John felt a surge of determination. He would protect her. He would face Karen, no matter the cost. But even as he prepared himself, a cold thought crept into his mind. What if this was more than just a fight over rules? What if Karen had come for something else entirely, something far worse than either of them could imagine? The room grew silent again. Karen's eyes never left theirs, sharp and calculating. John could feel the tension like electricity in the air, ready to explode at any moment. And in that silence, the calm before the storm, John realized one terrifying truth: tonight, nothing would be the same. The air inside the house had grown thick and suffocating, like fog rolling in from nowhere. Every tick of the clock on the wall felt louder than the last, echoing in John's chest like a warning drum. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything, that could calm the storm brewing before him. But there was nothing. Only Karen, standing like a shadow of fury, waiting for the moment to strike. Emma sat silently in her wheelchair, her fingers gripping the armrest so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She watched Karen with wide eyes, sensing the danger before it even arrived. There was something in Karen's movements that was off, something calculated and deliberate. She didn't just want to argue. She wanted control. She wanted fear. And in that moment, Emma understood the terrifying truth: this was no longer about rules. This was personal. John swallowed hard. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Karen, please, just tell us what you want. We can fix it. We don't want trouble." Karen tilted her head slightly, a cold smile creeping across her face. "Trouble," she echoed. "Oh, John, you have no idea what trouble really means. You think this is about a simple disagreement? No, this is about respect. And you have none." Her words were venomous, but her calmness made them worse. She was not screaming, not yet, but the danger in her voice was like a storm waiting to break. John could feel the panic rising in his chest, squeezing his heart. He wanted to back away, to put space between them, but the walls of the room felt tighter, pressing in on him like a trap. Emma's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Karen. Her mind raced. She had always relied on John to protect her, but now she realized that even he might not be enough. Karen was a force they had never faced before, and fear began to creep into Emma's veins like ice. Karen took a step closer. "Do you think hiding behind excuses will save you?" she asked. Her voice had dropped, soft but deadly, like a snake ready to strike. "Do you think pretending everything is fine will protect you from what's coming?" John's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He could feel anger rising, but beneath it was a more primal feeling: fear. Fear that Karen was capable of far more than anyone could imagine. Fear that tonight, their lives could change in an instant. Emma tried to speak, to reason with Karen, but her voice faltered. "Karen, please, we've done nothing wrong." Karen laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. It was cold, sharp, and bitter. "Nothing wrong," she repeated. "You've broken every rule I've set. You think I won't notice? You think I'll just let it slide?" John's heart pounded in his ears. Every word from Karen felt like a knife, cutting deeper into the fragile sense of safety they had built in their home. He glanced at Emma, her eyes wide with fear, and a surge of protectiveness filled him. He would not let her be hurt. Not like this. But Karen wasn't done. She moved closer, circling them like a predator. "You think you're clever," she hissed. "You think you can outsmart me, hide from me, ignore me. But I see everything. I know everything. And soon, you will pay." John tried to take a step forward, to intervene, but Karen blocked him. She seemed to anticipate his every move, her presence oppressive and suffocating. The room seemed smaller, darker, heavier. Every shadow on the walls looked like it was alive, moving with her, closing in on them. Emma's grip on the armrest tightened. She could feel her heart racing, her mind screaming for a solution, for an escape, for help. But there was none. Karen had trapped them, and John realized with a sinking feeling that the storm had only just begun. Then, suddenly, Karen stopped moving. The tension in the room shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and a strange smile crossed her face. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that promised chaos. John could not breathe. The fear in his chest had grown unbearable, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had to protect Emma. He had to stay strong. But deep down, he knew the situation was spiraling out of control. Karen leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried all the menace of a hurricane. "Soon, very soon, you will see what happens when rules are broken." John's mind raced. He wanted to move, to fight, to protect, but he felt paralyzed by the intensity of her presence. Every fiber of his being screamed that something terrible was about to happen, something they could not escape. Emma's hand found his, squeezing tightly. "John," she whispered. "I'm scared." John's own fear was mirrored in her eyes, but he nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, Emma. I know." And in that moment, the quiet before the storm stretched longer than any second should, leaving only the sound of their hearts beating in unison, echoing the danger that had entered their lives. The night outside had grown darker, shadows creeping along the walls, as if the house itself sensed the approaching disaster. And for the first time, John realized that Karen wasn't just angry, she was dangerous. More dangerous than he had ever imagined. He had no idea what she was planning, no idea what she would do next, but one thing was certain, their lives were about to change forever. The house had fallen into a heavy silence, broken only by the faint hum of the evening breeze brushing against the windows. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching longer across the walls, twisting and moving like dark fingers. John could feel a chill creeping up his spine. Something was coming, something darker than he had imagined. Karen's presence filled the room like a storm cloud. She moved slowly now, deliberately, as if savoring the tension she had built. Her eyes locked onto Emma, sharp and unyielding. John stepped instinctively in front of his wife, shielding her as best as he could, but he felt powerless. This wasn't an ordinary confrontation. It was a threat that could not be reasoned with. "Step aside, John," Karen said softly, almost sweetly, but there was poison in her tone. "It's not about you anymore. It's about what needs to happen." John's heart pounded. He didn't understand her meaning, but the instinctual dread clawing at his chest told him he didn't want to. Emma's hand shook as it clutched his. He whispered, almost to himself, stay calm, but even he knew that words were useless now. Karen's eyes flicked from John to Emma, and in that instant, the world seemed to slow. Every sound, every movement, every heartbeat became sharp and clear. John's mind raced, imagining the worst, feeling the helplessness settle like stone in his chest. Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of trust and fear. "John, what do we do?" she whispered. Her voice was soft, trembling, but it carried a weight that made his chest tighten. Before he could answer, Karen's hand shot out, knocking something to the ground with a loud crash. The sound made Emma gasp, and John flinched. The tension in the room snapped like a taut rope. He realized Karen didn't care about words anymore. She had crossed the point of reason. John lunged forward, trying to block her, but it was too late. Chaos erupted in an instant. He could only watch as the world around him spiraled out of control. The room became a blur of movement, sounds of struggle, sharp shouts, and crashing objects filling the space. He felt the impact of the moment before he could react, a crushing realization settling in. Time slowed for him as he saw Emma caught in the middle, vulnerable and unprotected. His mind screamed, but his body felt frozen. The unimaginable had happened. Emma's eyes, wide with fear, met his one last time. In that brief, haunting glance, John saw everything, the love they shared, the life they had built, the future that was being ripped away. Then, silence. John sank to his knees, his chest heaving, the reality crashing into him with unbearable weight. Emma was gone. The world seemed to tilt, and for a moment, nothing made sense. The warmth, the light, the love, everything had been swallowed by a darkness he could not escape. Karen stood over them, her face unreadable now, a strange calm settling over her. The storm in her eyes had quieted, replaced by a cold, empty certainty. She had done what she came to do. John's hands shook as he reached for Emma, but it was too late. The emptiness hit him like a tidal wave. The house that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a cage, filled with shadows and echoes of what had been lost. He couldn't scream. He couldn't cry. All he could do was stare, trapped in a nightmare he could not wake from. Minutes felt like hours. The evening light faded further, leaving only the dim glow of the room, casting long, jagged shadows. John finally looked up at Karen. Her expression was unreadable, but her presence was a final, terrifying declaration: the moment of innocence was over. A deep, hollow rage and grief flooded John at once. He held Emma's hand, feeling the coldness that replaced the warmth he had known for years. The world outside went on, oblivious to the tragedy that had taken place inside this small house. But John knew he would never be the same again. Nothing would ever be the same again. And then, a faint sound, almost too quiet to notice, rippled through the room. It was a sound of movement, deliberate and careful. John didn't recognize it at first, but instinct told him to listen. The storm was not yet over. Somewhere, far away from this moment of loss, a new presence had arrived. Someone who could change everything. Someone who could turn the tide. But for now, all John could do was kneel beside Emma, clutching her in disbelief, as the shadows of grief and fear settled around him. The room was quiet now, but it was not peace. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath feel like a struggle. John knelt beside Emma, staring at her with disbelief, unable to comprehend what had just happened. His hands shook, fingers trembling as if they might drop the world along with the lifeless weight before him. Tears welled in his eyes, blurring his vision. How could this be real? Just moments ago, they had been safe, happy in their home. And now, it felt as if the very air had been stolen from them. The warmth, the laughter, the small ordinary moments they had shared, they were all gone, leaving only emptiness. John's mind raced, but his body froze. His instincts screamed to call for help, but his throat felt tight, as if the words were trapped inside him. Around him, the house was a mess. The broken objects, the overturned chair, the faint smell of chaos all reminded him that nothing would ever be the same. Emma's face, pale and still, haunted him. He remembered her smile, her laughter, the gentle way she had always reached for him. And now, it was gone. A scream threatened to escape his lips, but he swallowed it, knowing it would not change anything. He looked toward the front door. Karen had vanished. The storm she had brought had passed as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving only destruction and grief in her wake. John's heart pounded in his chest, not just from sorrow, but from fear. Fear that this was not over. Fear that she might return. John's eyes scanned the neighborhood from the window. Everything seemed normal outside, like life had gone on as if nothing had happened. The calm street, the quiet houses, the faint hum of distant traffic, it all mocked him, a cruel contrast to the nightmare inside. He sank further to the floor, holding Emma's hand, feeling the coldness that replaced the warmth he had known for years. His mind replayed every moment, every word, every movement, trying to find where it had all gone wrong. But there was no answer. Only the raw, aching emptiness that threatened to swallow him whole. Then a sound. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but John heard it. A soft shuffle, careful and deliberate, coming from somewhere outside the house. His pulse quickened. His body tensed. Could it be help? Hope? Or another danger? He crept to the window, peering through the dim evening light. Across the street, he saw a figure moving with purpose, confident and deliberate. There was something in the way this person carried himself, something powerful, trained, and focused. John's chest tightened, not from fear, but from a flicker of hope. Could it really be someone who could fix this? Someone who could stop the nightmare that had just destroyed his life? The figure stopped for a moment, surveying the house, then moved closer. John's heart raced. He could not yet see the face clearly, but there was no mistaking the presence. Someone had arrived. Someone dangerous. Someone who could change everything. A memory flashed in John's mind, a conversation he had shared with his brother long ago, a brother who had trained in ways most people could never imagine. A brother who had fought in battles far from here, a man who knew how to handle danger. Could it be him? Could it be the only person capable of saving them now? The figure took another step forward. John held his breath, staring at the approaching silhouette, feeling a strange mix of fear and relief. For the first time since the tragedy, he felt a spark, small, fragile, but alive. He returned to Emma, pressing his hand to her cold one. "Hold on," he whispered, his voice breaking, yet firm. "Someone's coming. You're not alone." The house remained quiet, but the air had shifted. The shadow of hope had entered, bringing with it the possibility that the nightmare was not yet complete. But John knew one truth with absolute certainty: whatever happened next, they were about to face it. And the next 10 minutes would change everything. Outside, the figure moved closer, their steps deliberate and unyielding. The stage was set. The storm had begun. The faint rustle outside grew louder. John's heart raced, each beat echoing in his ears like a warning drum. He could barely believe what he was seeing. Across the street, the figure that had appeared moments ago moved closer with a calm, deliberate confidence. Every step was measured, precise, someone trained, someone dangerous. Someone who did not hesitate. John's mind raced, and then it clicked. His brother. His SEAL brother. The one who had always been strong, fearless, unshakable. The one who had faced danger in ways John could never imagine. And now, here he was, standing across the street, ready to change everything. Emma, still pale and trembling, looked up at John. Is that him?" she whispered. John nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "Yes, he's here." Across the lawn, the SEAL brother's eyes scanned the house, taking in every shadow, every detail. His movements were silent, almost ghost-like. He crouched low, shifting his weight with careful precision, as if he could sense the danger before it even touched them. Karen had not yet noticed him. She was still inside, basking in the chaos she had created, unaware that someone far more skilled than she had just entered the scene. The SEAL brother moved closer, his presence commanding, fearless. Every step he took seemed to push back the darkness, filling the space with a new kind of tension, one that was not fear, but control. He was in charge now, and everyone who faced him would know it. John's chest tightened, a mixture of relief and awe. His brother had always been like this, calm under fire, precise, deadly if needed, but always protective. And now, at this moment, he was all they had. The SEAL brother reached the edge of the yard, crouching low, his gaze fixed on the front door. John could barely breathe, his body tense with anticipation. He could feel the shift in the air. The storm that had seemed unstoppable might finally meet resistance. Inside the house, Karen suddenly sensed the change. Her head snapped toward the window. Her eyes widened just a fraction, the first sign of fear flickering across her face. But it was too late. The SEAL brother's voice cut through the tension, calm but commanding. "Step outside. Now." John could hear Karen's sharp intake of breath. The balance of power had shifted in an instant. The predator who had terrorized their home was now facing someone trained to stop her. Someone who would not hesitate. John pressed his hand to Emma's, whispering, "It's okay, he's here. Everything's going to be okay." Outside, the Seal brother moved with precision, closing the distance with calculated steps. The quiet before the storm had ended. Now, the real confrontation had begun. Karen's eyes darted to the window, then to the street, realization dawning too late. She had underestimated him. And for the first time, John saw fear in her eyes, a fear that had never been there before. The Seal brother paused at the front, assessing the situation in silence. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He simply observed, calculated, prepared. In that moment, John knew they had a chance. A real chance. The night outside had grown darker, shadows creeping along the walls of their house. But inside, something had shifted. A spark of hope had entered the room. The storm was not over, but now, it had a challenger. John squeezed Emma's hand, feeling her trembling ease slightly. "He's going to fix this," John whispered. And deep down, he knew it was true. But even as hope flickered, John could sense that the next moments would define everything. The coming confrontation would decide their fate, and nothing would ever be the same again. The night had grown quiet outside, but inside, the air crackled with tension. John's chest tightened, and Emma clutched his arm, her trembling slowing only slightly. Across the street, the Seal brother crouched low, eyes fixed on the house, every sense alert. He had come prepared for chaos, and chaos was exactly what awaited him. Karen stood in the living room, her face pale now, the confident rage that had dominated her moments ago replaced by cautious calculation. She realized, perhaps too late, that the balance had shifted. This was no longer her game. The Seal brother stepped onto the lawn, moving with precision. Every step was deliberate, controlled, commanding. The tension inside the house was unbearable, like a rope stretched to its limit. John held Emma close, feeling her shiver, but there was hope now, hope that someone capable, fearless, and trained was there to confront the storm. "Karen," the Seal brother called, his voice low but carrying authority. "Step outside. It's over. You don't have to do this." Karen's eyes flickered with defiance, but the first crack in her armor was visible. She hesitated, then stepped closer to the door, her movements slow, measured. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The calm before the final storm. John felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. Could this end without more pain? Could justice arrive without further tragedy? His gaze shifted to Emma, and in her eyes, he saw trust, a fragile belief that this moment might bring closure. Karen opened the door. The cold night air swept in, carrying the faint sounds of the neighborhood, unaware of the drama unfolding. The Seal brother's presence was overwhelming, silent but electric, as if the ground itself obeyed his steps. For a brief moment, there was nothing but eye contact, two forces confronting each other. Karen's anger met a calm, unshakable determination. She knew she had underestimated him. And in that instant, the power of fear that had ruled the house vanished. The Seal brother didn't move aggressively. He didn't strike. He simply stood, steady, his eyes locked on Karen, conveying control, strength, and a warning she could not ignore. The silent message was clear: the chaos ends here. Karen's face tightened, a mixture of shock, anger, and fear. She backed up slightly, unsure of what to do next. For the first time, she realized that the rules she had wielded as weapons against others could not protect her from someone trained to stop her. Inside, John exhaled slowly. His body had been tense for hours, every muscle coiled with fear. Now, a cautious relief began to wash over him. He looked at Emma, whose hand still held his, and whispered, "It's over, it has to be over." The Seal brother nodded almost imperceptibly, signaling that control was restored, that danger had been neutralized. John felt a wave of gratitude, hope, and sorrow all at once. The night's horror had passed, but the loss of Emma, their life together, was permanent. The grief would remain, but now there was protection, safety, and a chance to survive what had once seemed impossible. Karen, realizing she was cornered, made a final retreat, her power broken by the presence of someone she could not overpower. The storm she had unleashed dissipated, leaving only shadows and echoes in the house. John sank to the floor, holding Emma's hand one last time, whispering words she could no longer hear. Tears streamed down his face, grief mingled with relief. The nightmare had ended, but the scars, both seen and unseen, would remain forever. Outside, the night air was still. The street lights flickered, and somewhere distant, a dog barked, a reminder that life continued. But inside the house, everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. And in the shadows, John sensed one truth: even though the immediate threat was gone, the world could still be dangerous, unpredictable. He had survived the storm, but life had taught him that vigilance, courage, and the bonds of family were the only things that could carry him through the darkness. The camera of imagination would linger on John's face, eyes weary but determined, hands gripping the memory of what he had lost, and a faint shadow of hope flickering in the distance. The story had ended, for now, but the consequences, the lessons, and the pain would live on. And somewhere, in the quiet night, the faintest trace of movement hinted that this story might not be over completely. Karen had vanished, but the echoes of her actions would linger, waiting, watching, perhaps for another day.